It's not every day that an entire state industry gets turned on its head twice in just a matter of hours. But that's exactly what happened in Kentucky's beauty industry on September 9th, 2024. It was this wild day that started with a huge step forward and, well, it ended with a pretty dramatic change at the top.
All right, so let's dive right in. Just look at this timeline. At 9 in the morning, you've got this historic celebratory moment. Then, bam, just 3.5 hours later at 12:30 p.m., a unanimous vote to remove someone. It's kind of wild, right? These two events show us two totally different ways change can happen. One pushed from the top, and the other, well, that one came straight from the people. So let's break it all down, starting with what happened that morning.
So first up, let's talk about the morning. This was a really big deal, a moment of progress that honestly was years in the making. It was all about bringing a brand new and pretty vital perspective to the state's most powerful board for the beauty industry. Okay, to really get why this is so important, you've got to understand what this board even is. The Kentucky Board of Cosmetology. They're the ones in charge of the entire industry in the state. They make the rules, they handle the licenses, the whole shebang. So as you can imagine, who gets a seat on this board? Yeah, that's a very big deal for thousands and thousands of professionals. And that morning, the board welcomed a brand new member, Michael Carter. Now, this wasn't just, filling an empty chair. His appointment was a huge shift. It was about finally giving a voice to a group that had been, well, kind of ignored for decades. And this is the part that's just, wow. For the first time in the board's entire history, a licensed nail technician was finally given a seat at the table. Think about that. Before this moment, a huge part of the beauty industry had absolutely zero direct representation on the very board that made all the rules for them. So you might be wondering, how did this finally happen? Well, it wasn't just a random decision. It was the direct result of a new law, Senate Bill 14. This law was passed specifically to open up the board and get more people represented. And that's what paved the way for Carter's historic appointment. It's a perfect example of change coming from the very top. All right, now let's shift gears to the second big event of the day, because this is where the story takes a completely different turn. Just as the industry was celebrating this awesome new representation, something else was brewing, right there in the very same meeting. So the board goes into a closed-door session, and when they come out, they take a vote. And it was decisive, and it was unanimous. The executive director, Julie Campbell, was removed from her job, effective immediately. And let me tell you, a unanimous vote, that sends a very powerful message. And just to give you some context here, this wasn't some new hire they were letting go. Julie Campbell had been the executive director for about 7 years. So this decision, it was the end of a pretty long run and a really significant turning point for the board's leadership. So the big question is, what on earth drove a unanimous decision like that? Well, it turns out it wasn't just some internal performance review. Nope. This was a direct response to a very, very loud call for change from the public. And this number right here, this really shows you the scale we're talking about. Over 1,700 people signed a petition demanding she be removed. That's a mix of licensed pros and the general public. That's not just a quiet complaint in the suggestion box. That is a roar. And look, we don't even have to guess that the petition was the cause. The official reports from the meeting make the connection crystal clear. This quote here directly links the board's decision to, and I quote, pressure from the public. And it even calls out that 1,700 signature petition by name. The community spoke up, and the board, well, they actually listened. So let's just step back and look at the whole day. On one hand, you have the first big change, Carter's appointment. That was driven by lawmakers, a formal top-down kind of reform. Then, on the other hand, you have this removal, which was pushed by over 1,700 regular people from salons and communities all over the state, a total grassroots, bottom-up movement. You've got these two incredibly powerful but different paths to change, and they both came together on one single wild day. So what's the big takeaway here? When you see two massive but totally different shakeups like this happen in just a few hours, what does that tell us about the future of this board and really the whole industry it's in charge of? Well, it really points to 4 pretty big things. For starters, it signals a brand new era of representation. Getting a nail tech on the board means more voices are finally going to be heard. Second, it sets a whole new standard for accountability. The director's removal sends a clear message that leadership has to answer to the community. Third,
It's just proof that getting involved actually works. That petitions and public pressure can make a real difference. And finally, the whole day just screams that the industry is not just ready for reform, it's demanding it. At the end of the day, this one single day in Kentucky is just a fascinating case study. It kicked off with this victory for representation that was, frankly, long overdue, and it wrapped up with this incredible display of public accountability. It really leaves you with a powerful question, doesn't it? When a community decides to speak up and its leaders actually listen, it makes you wonder, what changes next?